Hello everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of boards, recorder videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. With this video, we'll be reviewing the supplement, Coach Kruzzlak's Guide to Sports, designed by Lucas Anderson, Joanne Loader, and Brian Barfield for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Full disclosure, Lucas is a patron. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you are interested in a sponsored review, please reach out via email, Twitter, or Discord, or my submission form at roguewatson.com. If you enjoy my content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Now, I am a fan of sports in fantasy settings or any, sci-fi setting or something. There's a fun scene like in Starship Troopers where they play some incredibly violent, insane version of football, and I always like it when we get to see just kind of like what sports, because I feel like sports is such a universal concept, people getting together for competitions, and I always like it, especially in like fantasy settings specifically or sci-fi settings, when we see something that's not just like gladiatorial arenas or sports or chariot racing, things that would specifically be in that thing, but like what would a completely different universe develop into sporting matches. And for all of Harry Potter's issues, and I'm not even going into the controversy of J.K. Rowling and everything, I will respect the fact that Quidditch is like completely different from anything that's, there's no real world analog to that. Although, on the other hand, if you think about Quidditch for more than like 2 seconds, I think the rules completely fall apart. But so what I was hoping was to read about some really cool, interesting, original sports ideas to throw into D&D and then have some, rules and things for that. Unfortunately, that is not what we get here. Instead, what this is, it simply brings in all the major sports from our universe into D&D with just a disappointingly few little tweaks and things to make it kind of fantasy-ish. And I was crushed by kind of the just mundane feeling of all these sports. It's not why I want to play in a fantasy universe necessarily, but maybe your mileage may differ and you would perk up with a chance to play, Thwacker, which is just kind of home run derby version of baseball, or this one, Celestial Rings, which is just basketball but played with 3 rings instead of 1 hoop, or Dragon Brawl, which is literally just football, Power Pong, which is tennis, although it's like tennis plus hot potato, because in Power Pong, you have like an exploding grenade as your ball, which that is an interesting little twist, although it doesn't seem like you have much control over who's going to get exploded on. And that's pretty much what you're going to get for all these. There are 10 of these sports, which again covers all the major sports, and I think the most interesting ones are the ones that at least try to go a little bit more beyond what you'd expect that sport to be. So for example, free fishing, I actually laughed out loud when I was reading the description of this. It's not just fishing. Instead, they drop a fish into a pool, which hopefully it's not a chlorinated pool, by the way. You cannot mix chlorine. Chlorine is a deadly, it's just bleach, basically. You can't put fish in there, and you have to. So I have fish tanks. I've been an aquarium hobbyist for about 20 years. And please don't just drop fish into random water things. You have to cycle the tank. You have to do the whole nitrogen cycle. Anyway, that's me going off on a rant. But hopefully it's a cycled fish tank that is able to have fish in it, or else this fish is going to have the worst day ever. And it's probably already going to have the worst day ever, because this whole sport is you drop a fish into this tank, and then you put people in there, and the people have to swim and grab this fish. That actually sounds really, really hilarious and fun. Also sounds impossible for anybody to grab a fish in the water, no matter how big or small the tank is. Also, how would you even handle some races having swimming speeds? In fact, to go off on another rant, how would you handle like all these races participating in these sports when you have such a huge diverse, just size alone? Like, I know that recent rules have kind of decoupled races from stats, which is nice and I respect it. But like a basketball type sport, it still matters if you're a halfling versus a half orc. You know what I'm saying? So there's got to be some very tricky, like pretty much racist rules regarding some of these sports that this does not go into. But it's the culture of sports that I'm almost interested in addition to the rules. Like, how would all these sports work in this fantasy setting? Which unfortunately is not really answered here. Instead, we pretty much just get into the nitty gritty of the rules, which the rules are simple on the one hand, which is nice, but also kind of vague. And I feel like you could have written a whole supplement on any one of these sports that probably would have been a lot more useful had they gone, just concentrating like okay, let's just do football. Let's do fantasy football and let's, fantasy football. And just make, a lot of rules about it and have like these tables and, here's some NPCs and maybe some side quests that involve it. Like, I think that would have actually been more helpful than just giving me 10 little blurbs about sports that we can throw together to do simple rules. Some of the rules work fine and, they're basically just a bunch of skill checks. Some of them are a little crazy, like the jousting one involves you making an attack roll as you hit each other. Then you have to make a dex save if you fall. Then you have to make like a con save after you fall. It's kind of a little much. Elegantics is a little more interesting. It's fantasy gymnastics, but the description makes it sound like you have to use spells in your routine, which is at least more interesting. It says you could use freeze the ground with a cone of cold spell and then slide on it with exceptional grace, create a light show with dancing lights while performing a backflip. You could create a fireball illusion and then tumble through a bunch of hanging rings. You can use illusion spells to make music. It doesn't say in the rules that you have to use a spell, but it sounds like from the description, it's kind of for magic users, and they're casting a spell and then performing some kind of daring, acrobatic feat, which sounds pretty interesting at least. Mixed martial combat is probably the worst one because it's literally just grappling each other, and there's already grapple rules in D&D, so I don't know really why we needed to even have that one. Magic flag, as far as I know, capture the flag is not a literal major sport. And this one at least uses some interesting mechanics where everybody is given like a wand that is supposed to have the same kind of spells to like every person. And then you're supposed to grab this flag, but the flag is attached to like this power armor that somebody needs to grab, and then they have to make their way back to the base. This one is very popular in video games, obviously. A lot of PvP type video games have some sort of tug and pull capture the flag type mode. And I thought it actually sounds pretty interesting here. And again, this is what I was hoping we would get more of, is less of the real world sport analogs and more of these more, interesting sport ideas that, in a D&D case uses magic in some really interesting, non necessarily combative ways. Although this one is basically just a combat scene, but still, at least we're giving everybody, wands, and they've got their own spells. And although if you have your own spell casting modifier and abilities, then you can use that in place of just the default +0, so clearly spellcasters will be at a little bit of an advantage there. The raceathon is just a marathon with a bunch of skill checks, although it uses 3 different legs, and each leg is a different skill check or dex save involved or something to that effect. Something that I was also really disappointed with here is you can see the overall presentation has much to be desired. It's just basically simple 2-column, and it's a lot of text. It's a lot of text, and normally this would be broken up with subheadings and tables, and this product does not use either of those. Instead, it just bolds the very front of it. It doesn't even use like page breaks or anything, so it's not easy to read. It's not easy to look at and try to parse the information from it. And you got to have tables. This is a D&D rules book. You got to have tables. Even if people aren't going to use those tables, you need to use tables because it helps break up the presentation of your product. And there's there's plenty of opportunities to use tables here. Give me tables for complications, which there are complications that are listed in some of these, like the marathon one has complications involved, on certain legs of the trip, like things can get in the way, or you have to dodge, falling things or wagons in the road or something. But use that, give that to me in a table format, and that makes it really easy to look at a glance. And then, I can see if I want to actually roll on a table or just pick whatever ones that I find most interesting. Also, give me tables for the suggested variants and NPCs, which are, again, included in here, but they're just not included as a table. So variants, include just different ways of running this particular sporting event, and then NPCs are literally what stat blocks you can use. Something that I think maybe should have been looked at as a model for designing sports rules were the dinosaur races from Tomb of Annihilation. I thought that was had a lot of good information in there. I ended up expanding that a lot more when I ran it. But the bare bones of how to do the race was there. But more importantly, the fun was there, right? It had the betting odds. It had the actual names of the NPCs and like their stats and how they would operate in the race. Like that's what makes it really exciting and fun. It allows you to create a narrative story based on the sporting event rather than just the simple, okay, you roll a dice and now I roll a dice. You really want to, if you want to create a memorable story, you need to attach, faces and events and have some, fun drama, lined up in there. And some of the characters are, can be rivals, and some are serious, and some are maybe trying to cheat. Like those are, all of those can be really, really interesting tables. And unfortunately, we just don't really get any of that here. But doesn't help also is the overall presentation level is just these very small, simple kind of art squares that head each of these different sports. That just feels like bare minimum to me. We do get new player backgrounds, which is pretty fun. One of them is the jock, which I had to look it up and remind myself. I was like, wait, we already have an athlete? And yeah, we did have an athlete. It was added in Mythic Odyssey of Theros. Now, this is not a new product. This one is a few years older that the designers wanted me to review. So perhaps maybe I'll give the benefit of the doubt and say that the athlete came after when this one released. I'm not exactly sure of the timing on that, but obviously the jock is very similar to the athlete in design. However, we also get the coach, the fanatic, and the bookie. I really like the fanatic, the idea of the sports fan. I think is a fun idea and a fun character trait for a character. And I'm sure we all have somebody in our lives that being a sports fan is their like number one character trait, and through which everything else is filtered. So I thought that was pretty nice. But again, why is the designer not using tables here? Like, these are clearly, they're designed like tables. They're just not designed like tables. You know what I mean? Like it is a table, but without the actual table like formatting that would help the presentation and break everything up. So very, very odd that there was just a reluctance to use a more traditional format, I guess, and not everything has to necessarily be ripped right out of the pages of, the 5th edition player's handbook and have that exact formatting, but at least having, separate sidebars and having those little, table, sections really just help in the visualization and being able to parse that information and understand, all the things that this product has to give. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for Coach Kruzzlak. Pro, it does offer 10 sporting events with history, rules, and suggested variants and NPCs. Might not be easy to find that information in here because it's all kind of just part of the same blog of text, but I appreciate that the number is there. The quantity is certainly there. The rules, I didn't find anything confusing or weird. If anything, it's a little bit too brief on the rules, but that's also kind of the perk of 5e, I think, is I'd rather have rules be a little too simple and vague rather than too complicated, because then I can always expand things and make it, a little more interesting if I want to. And I will include the player backgrounds as pros as well. That's a very nice add. Obviously, creating all of these traits, ideals, and bonds are not easy, and I appreciate that that information is there, and I think that's very appropriate to including that information for players. And I think Bookie is one of them, which is pretty funny. Somebody who's just always a gambler when it comes to sports. It would be a very fun character trait to play as well. So I think all of these would work out pretty well for player backgrounds. Cons, I'm just so disappointed that just about every sport here has a real world analog. That's, again, not what I was looking for personally when I want to run sports in D&D, or if I do, I want it to be a lot different. I want it, give me very, very different things, or maybe combine multiple sports together, make it more interesting rather than everybody's like, oh, okay, we're just playing baseball right now. Like, like at least enter some more things. Like the tennis with the exploding racket is at least a little bit more interesting. Maybe we could have done like floating platforms or something. And I don't know. I feel like there was more that could have been done to make this more interesting and creative. Another con is that the lack of tables I found really upsetting, because I just think every D&D book should have tables somewhere. And this one, there are plenty of opportunities for tables, especially with giving me NPCs or contestants, competitors, whatever you want to call them. The variants, the complications, all of those could have been tables for every single one of these entries. And the other con is I just think the presentation doesn't really work for me either. That kind of builds on the fact the lack of tables. I think tables would have helped it, but just the fact that it's just walls and walls of text with little bitty art in there just doesn't make it very attractive to look at, nor very, frankly, easy to gather the information from when I'm reading through it. Final verdict, adding simple rules for major sports in D&D is well-intentioned, but Coach Kruzzlak's real-world sports analogs represents a missed opportunity for more interesting and fantastical competitions. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and you can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Thank you.